Night settles differently on the waterfront in Bremerton. The air cools fast, the lights along the pier flicker against the water. And tied to the dock, rising out of the darkness like a steel silhouette, is a ship that hasn't sailed in decades, but still feels like it's waiting for orders. The USS Turner Joy. Up close, the ship doesn't feel abandoned, feels paused, as if the engines could rumble back to life at any moment, as if the crew might step out onto the deck and resume their watch. The metal beneath your feet carries a faint vibration, the kind that isn't really there, but feels like it should be. The wind moves through the railings with a low, hollow tone, and somewhere deep inside the hull, something shifts. A soft clang, a tap, a sound that echoes far longer than it should. You step onto the gangway. The ship looms above you, cold and quiet, but not empty, never empty. Steel holds memory differently than wood. It doesn't creak or sigh, it echoes. And as you cross onto the deck, the air changes. Sharper, colder, heavier, the way it does when you enter a place that remembers everything that happened inside it. A place where footsteps still travel down metal passageways long after the crew has gone. A place where voices drift from compartments that should be silent. A place where shadows move with purpose, not accident. Tonight we're stepping aboard a ship that served in war, carried hundreds of men, and now rests in the dark with stories still moving through its corridors. This is the USS Turner Joy, and some echoes never fade. The USS Turner Joy wasn't just another destroyer. She was the last of the Forrest Sherman class, fast, sharp-lined, and built at a moment when the Cold War was tightening in like a fist. Laid down in Seattle in 1957 and commissioned in 1959, she spent her entire career in the Pacific, where tension was a constant companion. Early on, Turner Joy served as a flagship ship for Destroyer Squadron 13 and Destroyer Division 131, a role that put her at the center of operations rather than the edges. She ran anti-submarine exercises along the California coast, escorted carriers, and even stood air-sea rescue duty near the Marianas during President Eisenhower's visit to Asia. A reminder that even routine missions carried weight in those years. But everything changed in 1964. That summer, Turner Joy and the USS Maddox were conducting DeSoto patrols, intelligence gathering missions off the coast of North Vietnam. On August 2nd, Maddox reported being attacked by North Vietnamese torpedo boats. Turner Joy raced to assist, and the two ships, along with aircraft from the USS Ticonderoga, engaged in a brief but intense exchange. One of Turner Joy's gunners later recalled that the ship fired the first shots of the Vietnam War. 2 nights later came the second reported attack, the event that would become the center of decades of controversy. Radar blips, confused sonar returns, and the chaos of night operations led to conflicting reports. Whether the attack actually happened is still debated, but the political consequences were immediate. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution passed within days, escalating America's involvement in Vietnam. Turner Joy was suddenly part of history, whether she wanted to be or not. After that, the ship returned to Vietnam again and again. She provided naval gunfire support along the coast, escorted carriers, and responded to emergencies. Her guns pounded shore positions, protected Marines, and supported ground forces during some of the war's most intense periods. She saw combat, she saw loss, and saw the kind of stress that settles into the steel and stays there. When she was decommissioned in 1982, Turner Joy had carried thousands of sailors, each leaving behind routines, memories, and moments of fear and relief, all of it absorbed into the ship's structure, into the decks, the bulkheads, the compartments that still echo when no one is there. Today she rests in Bremerton as a museum ship, but walking her decks, you don't feel like you're in a museum. You feel like you're stepping into a space that remembers what it was built for and what it lived through. There's something about approaching the Turner Joy at night that feels different from any haunted house or historic building. Houses breathe, wood shifts, old floors creak, but a ship like this, she waits. You step onto the pier, and the first thing you notice is the sound. The water slapping against the hull, the low hum of the city behind you, and the faint metallic groan of steel cooling in the night air. The ship rises above you, sharp-lined and angular, a silhouette of gray against the dark sky. The gangway feels narrow as you cross it. The air changes the moment your foot touches the deck, colder, sharper, carrying the faint smell of oil and old metal. Even after decades as a museum ship, the Turner Joy still smells like work. The main deck is open, exposed to the wind. The railings rattle softly. The deck plates vibrate under your feet in a way that doesn't make sense. A phantom echo of engines that haven't run since the early 80s. You can see the superstructure rising above you, ladders leading up to the bridge, hatches leading down into the ship's interior. Every direction feels like a choice. You head toward the Combat Information Center. Inside, the lighting is low, almost theatrical. The room is tight, filled with consoles and screens that once tracked aircraft, ships, and radar contacts. Even now, with everything powered down, the space feels tense, like a room built for decisions that had to be made fast. From there, you move into the passageways, narrow metal corridors where sound travels too far. Your footsteps echo in ways that don't match your pace. The walls feel close, the ceiling low. Every few feet, there's a hatchway you have to step over. A reminder that the ship was built for function, not comfort. The berthing compartments are even tighter. Rows of metal bunks stacked 3 high. Barely enough room to sit up. Lockers line the walls. The air feels heavier here, as if the space remembers the hundreds of men who slept in these racks, their routines, their exhaustion, their fear. You descend deeper into the ship, into the engine room. The temperature drops, the lighting shifts to a colder tone. Pipes run overhead and along the walls, creating a maze of shadows. Even in the silence, the room feels loud, as if the memory of machinery still vibrates in the steel. Back up on the deck, you make your way toward the aft gun mount. The space is open, exposed, and carries a different kind of weight. Investigators talk about this area more than almost any other. Footsteps, figures, sudden cold, and feeling of being watched. Finally, you move into the lower compartments, the places where visitors don't always linger. The air is colder, the lighting dimmer, and the echoes are sharper. These are the spaces where the ship feels the most alive. By the time you return to the main deck, the ship feels different. Not threatening or hostile, just aware. A haunted house feels different from a haunted ship. Wood absorbs sound, steel reflects it. In a house, footsteps thud. On a ship, they ring. On the Turner Joy, they ring in places where no one should be walking. People talk about a figure aboard this ship. Not a mist, not a blur, but a man. Or at least the outline of one. Tall, solid, moving with purpose. He's often seen near the engineering spaces, where the air feels heavier and the shadows fall in sharp angles. Sometimes he's spotted on the main deck at night, walking as if he still has somewhere to be. He doesn't drift like an apparition. He walks like a sailor on duty. Some investigators think he's residual, a memory replaying itself. Others swear he reacts to movement, to voices, to the presence of people. And on a ship like this, the line between memory and intelligence gets blurry fast. If the Turner Joy has a signature haunting, it's the footsteps. Heavy boots, slow pacing, metal deck plates carrying the vibration long after the sound stops. They're heard in the passageways, on the main deck, near the aft gun mount, in berthing, and deep in the lower levels when the ship is closed for the night. Sometimes they approach. Sometimes they retreat. Sometimes they circle a space like someone still walking after watch. And when you're alone on a steel ship, footsteps that aren't yours feel louder than anything else. Voices are another constant aboard the Turner Joy. Muffled conversations, short, clipped phrases, whispers that sound like they're coming from the next compartment over. They're heard in berthing, in CIC, in the mess areas, and especially in the lower passageways, the places where sound shouldn't travel at all. Some EVPs here have the cadence of military communication. Not emotional, not dramatic, just purposeful. And then there are the voices my niece heard. She's been on this ship multiple times, and every visit brings something different. But one night, after a tour had ended, she heard people talking deep below deck, far below where visitors weren't allowed. She called down, expecting stragglers. The voices kept chatting, but no one answered her. So she followed the sound deeper into the ship. She knew the layout. She wasn't worried about getting lost. But when she reached the bottom, the voices stopped. The compartments were empty. And when she turned to head back, the doorway she had just come through wasn't there. No cell service, dead walkie, silence. She sat down, steadied herself, and said out loud, "Boys, enough is enough. You've had your fun. I need to go. Please show me the way." She stood, turned, and the doorway was right there, exactly where it should have been. When she told the team leads what happened, they just kind of smirked and said, "Yeah, that's a thing." Berthing is one of the most emotionally charged areas of the ship. Rows of metal bunks, lockers lining the walls, air that feels heavier than it should. People report sudden temperature drops, cold pockets that cling to a single bunk, and the unmistakable feeling of someone standing beside them, close enough to touch. Berthing feels crowded, even when you're alone. The engine room is a maze of pipes, shadows, and metal. Even in silence, the space feels loud, like the memory of machinery is still vibrating in the steel. Investigators report metallic tapping, tools clinking, machinery sounds that shouldn't exist anymore, and shadows slipping between pipes. Some refuse to go down there alone, and honestly, I can understand why. This is one of the most active hotspots on the ship, the aft gun mount. People see figures standing near the mount. Footsteps circle the area. Cold wind cuts across the deck even on warm nights. And there's a heaviness here. Not threatening, but undeniable. It feels like a place where memory hasn't settled. And then there's the icebox, a space used for food storage, and, when necessary, to hold the bodies of fallen soldiers until they could be taken off the ship. During one investigation, my niece was given access to that room. While she was inside, a name came to her out of nowhere. Bobby. The moment she said it, a blue light appeared, captured on camera. Later, while reviewing the ship's memorials, she found a name on the POW MIA plaque. Not Robert, Not Bob, Bobby. The same name she had spoken aloud in the dark. The lower compartments are the quietest parts of a ship, and most aware. Footsteps behind investigators, air shifting without explanation, shadows crossing hatchways, the sense of being followed. These spaces feel like the ship's subconscious, the places where memories sink deepest. And when you're down there alone, with the steel closing in around you, you understand why people say the Turner Joy isn't just haunted. She's remembering. Ships remember differently than houses. A house settles, creaks, exhales, but a ship holds on. Steel doesn't soften with age. It doesn't absorb memory, it reflects it. Every sound, every vibration, every moment of tension echoes through the metal and settles somewhere deep inside the structure. The Turner Joy spent decades at sea. She carried thousands of sailors. She lived through long nights, long watches, and long stretches of silence broken only by the rhythm of machinery and the footsteps of men who knew their routines by heart. And when you walk her decks now, you feel all of that. You feel the weight of service, the repetition, the stress, the moments of fear, the moments of relief, the memories that never had anywhere else to go. Some hauntings come from tragedy. Others come from unfinished stories. But the Turner Joy feels like something different. A place where memory has soaked into the steel, so deeply that it still moves, still shifts, still echoes. The footsteps people hear aren't frantic, they're measured, purposeful, like someone still walking their watch. The voices aren't dramatic, they're conversational, routine, like sailors talking quietly in the next compartment over. Even shadows move with intention, not confusion. And then there are the moments that feel personal, like the name that came to my niece out of nowhere in the icebox, Bobby. A name she didn't know, spoken into the dark, answered by a flash of blue light, and later found on the ship's own memorial. Or the night she followed voices deep into the lower decks, only to find herself disoriented in a space she knew well, until she spoke aloud, asked for help, and the ship seemed to guide her back. These aren't just hauntings, they're interactions, echoes that still respond, memories that still move. The Turner Joy isn't a relic. She isn't a museum piece. She's a vessel that lived a long, complicated life, and still carries the imprint of every man who served aboard her. Some places are haunted because something terrible happened. Others are haunted because something meaningful happened. The Turner Joy feels like a ship haunted not by fear, but by memory. And as you step off the gangway and back onto the pier, you can't help but feel that somewhere deep inside the steel, something is still awake, still listening, still remembering. And thank you for joining me aboard the USS Turner Joy. This ship isn't just a piece of naval history. It's a place where memory lingers in the steel, where footsteps echo long after the crew has gone, and where the past still moves through the passageways like a quiet current. If you ever find yourself in Bremerton, take the time to walk her decks, stand in the engine room, look out from the aft gun mount, listen to the silence. You might hear more than you expect. Next time, we're heading back to Seattle, to Capitol Hill, where an old theater still holds on to its audience long after the final curtain fell. We're headed over to the Harvard exit. Until then, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, some stories don't fade, they echo.